So that we can kind of hit the ground running a little bit, what I've done is I've actually put together a lesson, right? Starter file set that basically kind of completes some of the steps that we already need to complete, right? So some of the steps that you guys already know how to do is create an HTML file, right? You already know how to do HTML. You guys have coded HTML before. So because you've already done HTML, we're not going to go over that step of relearning HTML. So all the HTML we're going to do, well, 90% of the HTML we're going to do, I've already written for you. It's already done, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't go in and modify it, move things around, change colors or whatever. Like, I want you to do that because the final project is a portfolio that you can actually present to future employers, and you don't want your portfolio to look exactly as your portfolio, right? You want it to look different. So because of that, you can go ahead and change your styling and stuff like that. But at least you have something to hit the ground running without having to go through a whole lot of extra setup, right? So in order to get started, what we'll do is we'll go to Blackboard, and we'll go to week 4. So go to your weekly learning. And just a note, when people are talking, I can hear it. It's just like a constant mumble up here. That's all I can hear is like whoa, 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 whoa kind of noise in my ear. Makes it very distracting when I'm trying to talk. Right, gentlemen? You hear what I'm saying? Hello? I don't know your names. Somebody tap on them and let them know. All right. Navigate to lesson 4. It's called Input Validation and Authentication. At the very bottom, you'll see lesson 4 starter files, plus you'll see this very scary project part 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about that in a little while. For now, let's just click on the less scary lesson 4 starter files. What are you in there already? You jump right in. You're the person that hears the creaking noise upstairs and goes upstairs to check instead of leaving the house, aren't you? All right, click on lesson 4. It should download. We'll likely go to your downloads folder. Once you have it, go ahead and navigate to your downloads folder. There's 2 ways you can get there. One, you can just click this little arrow beside the download. I'm not sure if you knew this. And you can click Show in Folder, and that will immediately take you to where it downloaded, which is really convenient, right? Or you can navigate to your downloads folder by clicking on the File Explorer and clicking on the sidebar. There's downloads. Just go straight there. Once you've navigated there, you'll see that there's a lesson 4 zip, right? I want you to extract it. Now, some of you have a different extraction tool. Some of you are using WinRAR. That's totally fine. Just make sure you extract to this directory. I'm going to click on, darn it. I'm going to right-click on it. There we go. Right-click on it and choose Extract All. If you're using WinRAR, I don't know if the word's extract. It might be unzip. I can't remember. I'm just going to leave the current destination for the files where it is and hit extract. It's going to extract them all, and then it's going to show me them. The directory we don't care about is that Mac OS X directory. We don't need to worry about it. The only directory we need, the only directory we need is this lesson 4 directory that's nested inside there. So just to go through that again, under downloads, I right-clicked on the zip file, hit extract, and extracted it to the default destination, which is the downloads folder. Then that puts me inside that lesson 4 folder, and you will see the lesson 4 directory in there. You want to make sure you're in this one and not the one above, not the parent, okay? You're going to copy this just by right-clicking on it and choosing to copy, right? Or hit Control-C. You're going to use your pinned link on the left-hand side to jump to your Comp1006 directory. If you don't have that, you're going to go to your C drive, WAMP64, www, Comp1006, and then you're going to right-click and paste. Okay? So now you have a lesson 4 directory in there. I'm going to rename mine to Monday just so I know that it's Mondays. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to rename it. You just leave yours the way it is. There's no reason for you to rename yours. Next, I want to open this inside my IDE, and something I learned last week, which is kind of neat, that Windows has that Mac does not have, is you can actually right-click on it and choose to open with code. So if you have Visual Studio Code, you can actually open the folder directly into Visual Studio Code, which is super handy. If you don't have that, what I recommend doing is open up your IDE, right, your editor. Just go to File, Open Folder. Click on your Lesson 4 folder and click Select Folder. And if you did it correctly, you should see all these files on the left-hand side, and your folder should be open in your IDE. So last week we took a SQL file and we imported it and we created 93 users, right? This week we're going to take the same SQL file, we're going to import it again, and what it's going to do is it's going to blow away the users we have. It's going to create 10 users that are going to have some relevant fields that we need. One of the relevant fields is role, and the other relevant field is password. Those are the two pieces we're going to need. The reason why we need that is because our users, we're a public user. When we go to a website, before we authenticate, we're known as a public user, meaning that we're accessing public material on that website. We're not accessing material that is restricted to us, right? When you go to Facebook and you sign in, you now become an authenticated user. And that authenticated user has access to authenticated things like your user profile, your Facebook feed, all of your messages, right? All of that pertains to you. However, there's a tier above you as well that you don't have access to, and that would be a Facebook administrator. So when you call Facebook, which doesn't happen, seniors call Facebook, you guys don't call Facebook, but somebody calls Facebook or emails Facebook, when they get that and they say, okay, you have a problem with your account and you want us to look into it, they have to have this super level power that basically allows them to go into Heidi's account, her Facebook account, for example, and look at her details and help her with her issues. Now, they don't have Heidi's password, they don't have her email address, but they don't need it because they're an administrative level. They can actually just use her name to look her up and then administer her account. So we need to think in that kind of idea because this is a common problem that people will hit. In fact, I would say out of all of the applications that I have built, role-based authentication has been at least 90% of them. It's the simple one-level authentication that is rare. And so when I first came out of college and I first got hit by my role-based authentication, I had to come up with a solution in order to solve this problem. And it was like the first problem I hit and I didn't know what to do. And then I figured it out, and I feel like that's the thing that people need to learn. They need to learn role-based authentication. Because making one authentication level, super easy. Making 2 levels of authentication gets a little trickier and you got to think a little bit more about it, right? So what we're going to build in your portfolio, you might be like, well, how does this have any relevance to my portfolio? Why would I have a general user authenticate and do anything in my portfolio? What would they do? So what we're going to basically do is allow people to create comments on your stuff. We're going to make them authenticate in order to stop bots and stuff like that from autofilling your form. We're going to make them authenticate to kind of validate who they are. And then they're going to be able to post comments, and then you're going to be able to approve those comments. So like kind of like testimonials, right? And they'll be able to add those to your account. In addition, they'll have a user profile that they'll be able to manage on your account as well. Plus, it will kind of show off that you understand role-based authentication and that you can implement it. It's kind of a flex moment, if so be it, all right? Then we're also going to need an administrative level, which will obviously be you, right? You'll be the administrator. And as the administrator, you'll be able to edit your page content, any of your information that needs to be put in there. You'll also be able to administrate users, meaning if there's a user that you particularly don't approve of or don't like, you can remove them. You have that capability, right? God mode. I like to call it God mode. It's administrative, but you have full control over the whole website. You have God mode, essentially. So in order to do that, we're going to have to adjust our database a little bit. And we could do it in a few different ways, but I think the easiest way is to just take this comp 1006 SQL file and dump it in. Makes sense to me. We're going to get rid of a whole bunch of fields that we don't really need. We don't need address information. We don't need phone numbers. So we're going to eliminate those. And we're going to add a role field, and we're going to add a password field to the database. So let's do that step first. First thing we need to do is open up WAMP and get WAMP running. Start up WAMP. Hopefully it goes green. Hopefully it doesn't stay red. Green or orange. Doesn't really matter if it's not green, just as long as it's at least orange. Once it's started up, open up your internet browser, and we're going to navigate to Php Myadmin. The address for that, you're going to have very difficult time following along if you're talking over top of me. You're not going to be able to follow along, and you're going to get lost. All right, I'm going to open a new tab. You're going to type in localhost, and you're going to type in Php Myadmin, and then you're going to hit enter. And that will take you to the Php Myadmin Gui. The default password is root. Some of you have a password, which is weird, but that's fine. If you have a password, likely your password is root unless you changed it. And then in that case, I can't help you. You need to figure out what that was. Click go to put you into the account. And yes, I already know we have a comp 1006 database. That's totally fine. We're not going to eliminate the database. We're just going to replace the table. In order to make sure that our import happens inside that database, we first need to click on that database. When you click on that database, it's the equivalent to you typing use comp 1006 in MySQL Workbench. It's literally the same command. If you did it correctly, you should see your users table there, right? If you were to look at the users table structure right now, which is right here, you can see structure, and you click on users, click on structure, you'll see that we have a lot of fields in our database table. We have first name, last name, email, phone number, address 1 and 2, postal code, city, province, country, all that stuff. We're basically getting rid of most of that. We're going to have first name, last name, email. Email will be our username, essentially, because everybody has a unique email address. And then we're going to have role and password added to it, and we'll keep avatar just for fun. So click on the import option on the far right. Nope, sorry. Click on comp 1006 on the far left. Then click import. We want to import into the database comp 1006. So once again, click on comp 1006 on the far left, and then click import. We're going to choose a file. That file is in the lesson 4 folder already for you. So just click on choose file. Navigate to your lesson 4 folder. Mine is not in this directory. Mine is in this directory. This is in the wrong spot. Hold on 1 second. I'm fighting with my computer here. There we go. Lesson 4, and on the root of the level, you'll see comp1006.sql. Go ahead and open that. Once it's open, just scroll to the very bottom and click go. What it's going to do is it's going to take the current table that's there, drop it, so we'll just delete it entirely. It will write a new table with new fields and everything into place. As I explained a couple of weeks ago, this is not a MySQL class. We are learning how to use PHP with MySQL. Any of the actual MySQL stuff that you want to know, I will always include the file. I make sure it's nicely formatted so it's easy to read. You are welcome to peruse the file, modify it, or change it in any way that you choose based on what you've learned in your MySQL class, but I'm not going to teach you what it is or what it means, right? That's your MySQL class responsibility. Otherwise, we'd spend all day just learning SQL. All right, cool. So if we look inside PHP Myadmin, we can actually click on users on the left-hand side and then click on structure. We can see that we have a first name table, first name field, last name field, email, avatar, role, and password. I've put a default value that's not going to make any sense whatsoever. That's because this default value is known as a hash. Wow, it's getting very difficult to talk. It's known as a hash. What a hash is when you take a plain word, right? In this scenario, I've taken the word test, and you hash it, it actually converts it into a 64-bit set of characters. That 64-bit set of characters happens to look like this. Now, part of that is also being done with the timestamp, the epoch timestamp. That's how it gets converted. No, you don't need to know how to create it. There's a function, very handy function inside PHP that will do this for us. But because we have users in our database, I want to make sure they have default passwords so that we can actually log them in and log them out. So the default password is actually test. All right. Okay. We have a few things to talk about before we actually get into this setup. We're going to talk about the structure of our application so that we can fully understand what we're building here. The structure of our application, we have an index file right here in the get-go. Our index file is just a basic file. We will talk about these pieces that you see inside here at a later point, but for now, the index file is just so we have a landing page when we go to our page in our website. To get to that index file in your browser, you just navigate to localhost comp 1006, hit enter, and you'll see the list of all of your directories. Click on Lesson for Monday, and it will hit this directory. Don't be alarmed about the errors. I already know that we have errors. There's a reason for that. So the first thing we need to talk about is the actual structure that we have over here on the left-hand side. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see it. So the structure here, we have 5 files, and these are in the root of our lesson 4 folder. The index file is our default page. It's the page you'll hit first. Then we have a contact.php page, and we have an about.php page. These 3 files are public. They are a public file. And when we build out our website, we'll keep them public. Public means that they don't have to authenticate to view those files, and they never will. We'll always keep those public. And that makes sense because when you're looking for a career, you want your index page to be the first thing that the visitor sees, and it should stand out and attract them and get their attention. You want to give them some information about yourself, right? So you create an about page and you talk about yourself, your skills, things you're looking for, things about your hobbies, stuff like that. And then obviously you have a contact page, so they have some way to get a hold of you. On your contact page, you can publish your phone number if you choose to. If you don't want to, make sure they have an email. We're going to build a form on the contact page, so they'll actually be able to contact you through a form. So we'll give them multiple ways to contact you. That's also where you're going to put your LinkedIn link, right? If you haven't joined LinkedIn, join LinkedIn. It should be a no-brainer. Definitely join LinkedIn. You might want to put your GitHub repo there. We will all sign up for GitHub in this class at some point. And then anything else that you think makes sense. I have on mine, I think I have, hold on. Yeah, I have LinkedIn, GitHub, Steam, why not, right? And my email address, including my phone number, my address, everything that I need for somebody to be able to get a hold of me, right? So those 4 files, these 3 files are all going to be public. This comp1006.sql file, because we want to be secure, we don't necessarily want to publish the details about our database. And this file, you could navigate to this in your browser and it would just be flat text, right? We're going to delete that because we don't need it. So just go ahead, right click on it and choose to delete so we don't publish it. Or you can move it to another folder. That's totally your choice. I'm going to say move to recycle bin and off it goes. Now you're going to see one other file in there called config. We're going to talk about the config file in 1 second, but before we talk about the config file, let's talk about our directory structure. Even though we're not jumping into model view controller systems, we are going to abide by some of their practices. And one of the practices is to keep our resources encapsulated. What a resource is, just in case you didn't know, what a resource is are things that you're storing in your database. Those are resources, right? So users is a resource because we're taking all the different details of a user and we're putting it in our database. We're manipulating that resource, we're modifying, we're reading that resource, we're interacting with that resource, right? Sessions, even though we're not putting sessions in our database, we're going to treat sessions as a resource, and we'll talk more about sessions in a little bit. Suffice it to say, it's a fancy word for authentication. It's really what it is. Now that we have these other two folders called partials and includes. Includes are like our connect script. If you open that up, you'll see the connect script that we built last week is sitting in there, right? The connect script that actually reaches out and connects to our MySQL database and connects to our MySQL database so that we can actually interact with it and add new information or delete information or update information. Anything that we're going to do like global function files, any classes, anything like that, any utilities, vendor libraries is what I call them, vendor libraries. Anything that's basically a utility will wind up going in our includes directories. Anything that is a view, and when I say view, I mean that you can physically see it in your browser, that it is actually an HTML component, is going to go in the next directory you see there called partials. In partials for now, we'll have a header, a footer, a main nav, and a flash component. Header is literally all the HTML that you see at the top of your page, starting with your doc type, your HTML tag, your header links for your style sheets, all of that. All that content is in your header. If you click on it, you can see it. See? All the stuff that we need for our opening part of our HTML page is there. Right down to our opening body tag. What you won't notice is there's no HTML afterwards. Where do you think that HTML is being put? Want to take a guess? Look at the partials. Where do you think it's going? In the footer, right? The footer is from the closing part of the body tag down, plus any scripts or anything else we're going to include in our file. So we have our HTML opening stuff and we have our HTML closing stuff. The idea is that every page will look the same, right? The only thing that is modified, that is different, that is dynamic, is the content in the middle between the two body tags. That will change. Now, you probably remember in the HTML class, you had to sit there and code. Every single page had to look the same because it was a 5-page website, right? So you had to do all of this stuff on every single page. Well, with PHP, you don't have to do that. You write it once, and then you include it wherever you need it to go. Because partials can contain partials, which makes things a little bit tricky. So, for example, here's the header partial. You'll notice as we scroll down, we have these two include scripts here, this one and this one. These are also partials. An issue that we will have is how PHP actually interprets where partials come from, where these files are located. What will happen is if I don't have this word here and I just had this, it will start at the root of our application. The root of our application, I really wish I had chalk. I love writing on the board. The root of our application is comp 1006, not the lesson 4 folder that we're currently in. It's outside of that. It's from the www section. That's where we start. That's the root of our application. Because of that, what can happen is when you go to reference these other partials inside a partial, this might work if you were to navigate to header.php. Those files might load just fine. However, when you include header.php in the user's index file, what will happen is it will treat it as the starting point, then try to go find partials, which doesn't exist in this user's directory, and it will come back and tell you file cannot be found. PHP always treats its includes from where it starts, not where they were defined in. So because of that, we have to do a little bit of normalization and basically turn all of our URLs into absolute URLs. So basically a good starting point. Now, it's totally fine that you're confused. Don't worry about it. Just giving you a little bit of precursor to what we're about to do. What I would like you to do is open up that underscore config.php file. That's where we're going to start. And we need to define two roots. We need to define the lesson 4 Monday root as a directory that exists on our computer. And then we also need to define it as a root in a URL. Okay? One is for including files. The other one is for navigating to links. So the HTML one is for links. The other one is for including files. So let's create both of these, and that will save us a lot of headache. The first one, we're going to use the command define. Define will actually allow us to declare a constant. How many of you used constants in Java? Cool. Constant, literally, it's what it says it is. Cannot be changed. Once you assign a value to a constant, it cannot be changed. That's the whole point. It's constant, right? It's not dynamic. You can't modify the value later. PHP doesn't have a clean, nice-looking way to define constants, unfortunately. This is the best we get. First, we give it the name that we want to call it, so we're going to call it root. So that's our constant name. Now, whenever we want to access our constant, we literally just call root, and that will access that constant. This is closer to the way C++ does it. Next, we give it its value. That's the second argument. We're going to use dir name, which is a function that's built into PHP, and we're going to call a predefined constant. Now, that is 2 underscores before file and 2 underscores after. So it's underscore underscore file underscore underscore. It is very important that you write this in capitals. Super, super important because that's how it's defined in their library. So once again, that's underscore underscore file underscore underscore. What that will actually return back is its current location. So it's going to come back and say, I am in C:/WAMP64/comp1006/lesson 4 Monday/ that's what it's going to return back, plus the file name, which is underscore config.php. What dir name will do is say, I don't care about the file name. I just want to know what directory you're in. And so it will say, cool, I'm in C:/wamp64/www.comp1006/lesson 4 Monday. And that's what it will return back, that great big string. And that's fine. We're going to save that as our root so that when we go to include any file, it always starts at our lesson 4 directory, right in the root of our lesson 4 directory. The HTML path is a little different. You can't give a directory structure as an anchor link path. It doesn't understand it. It doesn't know what you're talking about. It needs to come from the server. Servers don't talk in C:/. They talk in www.whatever, right? Or localhost/. Localhost represents our www directory on our WAMP server. So we need to get that back as the root, but we need to be dropped in the lesson 4 folder. So the way that one looks, again, we're going to do define. We're going to create a constant, and for those of you, yes, this is a bit blasphemous. This does not look like your normal constant because it's lowercase, but it makes more sense. We're going to create a base path variable. We're going to use string replace, which is a function in PHP that basically takes a needle, takes a haystack, and replaces it with a value. The needle is the thing you're searching for, the haystack is the thing you're searching in, and then the replacement value is what you're going to replace it with. So the needle in this scenario is going to be dir, here I'll shut this side so that it doesn't run off the screen, dir name, underscore, underscore, dir, underscore, underscore, which is a constant that will return the base path. So the base path will be the comp1006 directory. So now what we want to essentially do is take that and subtract it from that and leave just the path name left, which will be /lesson04. So comma, after dir, what we want to replace with empty string. We want to take whatever we're going to find and just replace it with an empty string. And we're going to find it in the root value we got back up from up here. This is very, very common in PHP applications, this process. This file will save you a lot of headache if you make sure you have it, if you go forward and you work on a PHP application. Normalizing your directories makes life a lot easier. So once again, what did we create? We created a way to access the root of our file system at that location where our lesson 4 folder is. It will literally drop us right into that lesson 4 folder and start from there. C:/wham64/www/comp1006/lesson4 is what that will actually evaluate to. What will this do? This will literally take C:/wham64/www/comp1006 and chunk it off. And it will leave us with /lesson04, which is a proper path, which we can use to create links. So any anchor link that we're going to do needs to use the base path. Any include that we're going to do is going to use root. And you'll see that as we go along. All right. So the best way to describe a partial is a piece of reusable HTML. You guys are so used to building functions which are reusable code, right? You guys are starting to do classes. You guys actually built a class now inside your Java, your object-oriented Java class? Yeah. And you started to define properties and methods. Do you call them properties and methods or data members and data fields? Properties and methods. Cool. That makes things a lot easier. So you're learning how to build those objects, right? And that allows you another step of reusable code. Well, HTML can be reused too. There's ways to do that as well. And PHP provides us that way by being able to encapsulate it in its own file and then include it where we want to use it. The keyword include, which is a function in PHP, what it does at its simplest form, what it does, it copies the contents of that file and pastes them wherever you call it. That's literally what it does. Just copies and pastes. It doesn't evaluate it. It doesn't parse it. It doesn't syntax check it. It does nothing else to the code. It literally just copies it and dumps it into your page. So it's not going to do any magic for you. But what it allows you to do is take reusable chunks of PHP or reusable chunks of HTML and include them in other files so that they're usable for you. Cool. Any questions about anything we've done so far? There's a big write-up on this in the actual lesson plan as well if you're a bit lost. Let's talk about creating our partials. Now, I think the partials are already basically created. Let's just double check that we're not missing anything. So this is our header file. Let's open up our underscore header file. And the 3 steps that we're supposed to do, we're going to wait till we talk about super globals before we do these 3 steps. So just leave that for now. But we will need the header file open. The next file is our footer file. Our footer file doesn't need anything. It's including currently our jQuery and our Bootstrap, because we're going to use Bootstrap as our default styling library. Bootstrap is just a CSS framework. That's all it is. I think many of you used it in your HTML class. Some of you did, some of you didn't. Takes about 30 seconds to learn if you go to Bootstrap's website. Basically, the idea behind it is it just takes like the common plain HTML and makes it look a little nicer. It gives you columns and grids, just a lot of easy to use type stuff if you're doing prototyping, which is what we're doing. Then we've got our main nav. And this is where we're actually going to start our code. So this main nav is basically going to be the navigation that appears at the top of every page that we have. And what we're going to do with our main navigation is we're just going to correct the links that are currently in there because the links are broken. All the links inside our main nav currently are relative, and we need to make them absolute. So we want to add the base path to all our URLs. So the first thing we need to do is include that config file that we're working with. And this is the only time that we get to use a nice relative path format to include it. So the way that's going to look, we're going to have to do this in a particular way so that we don't wind up with an issue. Instead of include, we're going to use include once. The difference between include and include once is include will always copy and paste the content. As many times as you call it is as many times as it will copy and paste it. Include once, we'll do it one time. So if it already exists, it won't do it again, right? So you don't have to worry about it existing in another file and causing it to include multiple times. Now we need to be able to navigate to that URL. Currently, we are in the partials directory. I think I've already got this in the header one. Nope, I don't. Maybe it's in the index file. 1 second, I just want to see how I did it. Yes, it's in the index file. All right. Put a couple of slashes in there. We need to navigate out of our main nav and into this config directory that's there. So we're going to go /_config.php. And that will include that file that contains our 2 constants, root and base path. Now we're ready to actually add the base path to all of our links that are currently in this page. So if you scroll down a little bit and you find your first link, you're going to see it right here. I'm going to leave this up so you can see it. You're going to find this A link right here on line 6, and you'll see the href. You'll recognize that as a link because you all took HTML and you've written in hyperlink before. This is our link. The href is the path that it's going to navigate to. Right now, it's navigating to /, which actually stands for the root of your application. If we leave that, what will happen is you'll click on the brand button and it will knock you out to Comp 1006, not in the lesson 4 folder. We want to stay in the lesson 4 folder. So what we need to do is append base path to this so we stay where we are. So the way that looks, we're going to use an inline echo statement. If I can type properly. PHP provides this. Basically what it is it's shorthand for PHP echo. Instead of writing PHP echo, you're just writing the bracket, question mark, and an equal sign. It means the same thing. And then we're going to spit out our constant base path. To make sure that works, what we'll do is we'll open up our main nav in our browser so that we can take a look at it. So go to your browser. Just after your lesson 4, type in partials and hit enter. That'll take you to the directory where all our partials are. Go ahead and click on the main nav. And if you just hover over this, your link at the top left, where it says SM, you'll see in the bottom left the actual directory structure, and that's exactly what we wanted to say. We wanted to say lesson 4 and then the slash. That means you're in the correct root path, which means if you were to click it, it'll take you right back to the lesson 4 path, which is where we're going to want to go. All right. Let's go ahead and correct the rest of the anchor links that we have in here. So if you scroll down, there's another one on line 14. Again, it's the shorthand echo statement on line 14 and base path, just before that slash. The about.php, we're going to need to do the same thing, but by this point, you're probably sick of writing it, so why don't we do ourselves a favor, highlight it, copy it, and paste it on line 17 beside the about.php. Then you can do the same thing on line 20 next to contact PHP. And it's going to push my line down. Notice this is wrapping. That's why there's a blank space here and not a line number. I didn't hit enter to get it to go down. It's wrapping. Scroll down a little further. On line 24, on the href there, paste it in there just before the slash of users. Just ignore this thing. I don't know why I left it in there. I meant to take it out. That's on line 24. Scroll down a little further to line, not this one, line 34. And paste on line 34 as well, just before users / new.php. And then you can do the same thing on line 35, which is just before users. Okay. And then I think there's 2 more. If you scroll down a little further on line 44, do it just before sessions. And on line 49, just before / users new. So just before / sessions on line 44, and on line 49, just before users new. Scroll down a little further to line 57 and paste it just before sessions. And then that's it. That's all of them. Okay. Just to help those that were following along, I'll just paste this also inside here. Inside our Slack channel. There you go. So if you had trouble following along, you can always copy and just replace the content. Yes. Yep, I can. Just 1 second. Just first, navigate to your browser. Let's just navigate to partials. So it shows up. Click on main nav, and you should see all of your links are all pointing to localhost lesson 4. Now, localhost lesson 4 is not quite where we want it to be, but it will correct itself when we load it up in the index file. Yes.
Loading the LAMP server.
So what's it doing when you actually go to execute the LAMP server?
Well, actually, sorry, not the LAMP server, but the directory in it. Like I can't get Just open, but it was opening before.
Comp 1006 PHP. So you need to go to comp. You need to go to that literal line, comp 1006 PHP. So you want to go to localhost comp 1006 PHP inside your browser. Enter. There you go. Yeah, and then go to week 4 and navigate over to the thing. All right. Let's see if this thing's loading up properly inside our index file. So what we'll do is we'll back it out so that we're just on lesson 4-MON. And we'll make sure that our actual nav loads properly. Hit enter. You should see your nav. You'll have a couple of errors, but you should see the nav here. Should be a long black bar with some links. And if you highlight over them, those are definitely incorrect. Yeah, those are incorrect links. Hold on. I think I might have missed a step. Let me just double check if that corrects it. No, it didn't. All right, we'll take a slight break, and I'll see what the issue is with that directory structure and why it's not loading from there. And then we'll come back to it after that. So why don't we take 10 minutes? Actually, we'll take 15. We'll go to 8:20, and then you come back at 8:20, and we'll start off from where we left off. Talk about where I actually made the mistake. So the issue that I'm having is that we're actually starting, our directory actually starts from comp 1006. So we go to localhost comp 1006. I kind of pulled a doofus, and when I work at home and I'm building these out, I have a virtual host that actually points directly to comp 1006, so I don't have the local host part. The problem with that is that when I went to centralize those paths, I did it based on my system and not on yours, which I should have did it based on yours. So I kind of goofed up. So we just have one small thing we actually need to do. If you open up the config.php file, you'll see here that instead of this being an empty string, you're going to put /comp 1006. Now, here's the thing. Some of you didn't call your directory comp 1006. You called it something else. I think one person had PHP web and a few had other things. This needs to be whatever directory is sitting in the www folder, whatever name you gave it, is what it needs to be. So if it's comp 1006, then just do that. If it's not that, then you need to make it whatever it is. Once you correct that, our lesson 4 folder should work without an issue. So once again, that's /comp-1006 unless you called it something else. Next, we have one more fix to do in our main nav. If you open up the main nav file, you want to make your include look like mine, where it's the dir name, brackets, __dir ___ dot /config.php. That will work unless you move the file. If you move the file, it won't work. As long as the file's where it was supposed to be, that should work just like a champ. And all of our links should work after that point too. All this configuration stuff is all kind of fiddly squiddly, and it takes a little bit to get through and complete. And I can appreciate it. This part's the boring part, right? This is the boring little bits that you have to put together to get everything to work. But we will, I promise you. I don't know how, but we will get users in the index page so that we can see them. I mean, I'm excited about it. I actually built a little funny thing in there that I want you to see. It's so cool. Yes, sir. Still not working for you? Okay, first of all, do you have include once dir name ___ dir ___? Yes? Okay. In your config file, does your config file look exactly like mine? Yeah? Okay. Navigate with me. Open up your File Explorer. Okay. Go to this PC. Double-click on your C drive. Do you have a WAMP64 folder in there? Double-click on your WAMP64 folder. Double-click on www. Is there a comp-1006 folder in there, or did you call it something different? -1006? And if you navigate into there, do you have your lesson 4 folder in there? Like if you double-click, is there a lesson 4 folder inside there? See where our problem is? You need to put the lesson 4 folder in there. So where's your lesson 4 folder then? Are you working out of your downloads directory accidentally? You might need to move wherever the folder is currently. Now, the easiest way to get there, man, is if you right-click on any file in this directory, right-click on index.php and choose to reveal and explore, it will take you directly to where that file is. The path up here should be C, WAMP64, www, comp1006, lesson 4 is what the path should be. If it's not, what I would do is move up a directory, copy that lesson 4 folder into that WAMP directory. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Sorry, say that one more time. If it's working, you don't have to change it. Yeah, it should be fine. All right, so we have our config file. We now have this main nav, and we will add some more features to our navigation. You'll notice, like one of the goofiest things about our navigation, if you look at it, let me refresh. We have my house, about me, contact me, log in and register. Well, that's not so bad. That's actually a pretty normal looking navigation. And I don't want to make things super easy on you. So let's modify some stuff to make it a little harder, and we'll add it in stages. This would have normally been set up for you already. Go to your main nav so that you have it. I totally missed this file. I don't know how I managed to miss this. Usually I go through and make sure I remove the right things. Scroll down to line 22. You'll see this crazy looking statement that you have no idea what it's doing, or maybe you do. Maybe you do know what it's doing. Either way, we want to get rid of it. So line 22, highlight line 22, and hit backspace and get rid of it. Okay? And then line 26 that has the PHP and if statement, highlight that and hit delete. So that just the li tag is still there. The next piece, inside line 24, this is a little tricky. You need to put your cursor after this closing PHP tag, bring it all the way back to the opening PHP tag, and then delete it. I'll leave it highlighted for a second so you can see what I'm deleting. I'm deleting from the opening PHP echo tag to the closing PHP tag. I'm not taking out any quote characters or the equal sign. I'm just this piece here on line 24. Highlight that and then go ahead and hit delete. So that'll leave you with just a very basic statement. And then if you're like me and have a little bit of OCD and you're kind of frustrated that this is indented, you can highlight all 4 lines and hit Shift Tab, and that'll pull it back by 1 indentation. I've seen some of your code. Some of you just don't care about indentation. I care about indentation. I can't stand it if it's all wonky. Do you care about indentation? Yeah. All right, we're almost done. Scroll down a little further to line 28. Great big massive if statement. Highlight the whole line 28 from the opening PHP tag to the closing PHP tag and hit delete. Let's get rid of that. And then we need to go get rid of the closing tag on line 38. So on line 38, you'll see the closing tag there. Delete that. So that was line 28 and line 38. And if you highlight all of that LI and hit Shift Tab, then it will line up properly. Okay. The frustrating part is we're going to put it all back in, but at a later time. Scroll down a little further to line 42, highlight that, delete, and then line 53. So that's line 42 and line 53. There's PHP statements on those lines. Go ahead and delete those. What these statements are for is that once we have our authentication in place, we're actually going to use those statements to basically make it so that a public user can't see certain things, an administrative user can see things that a normal user cannot, stuff like that. Just make it simplistic for them, a good user experience. Scroll down a little further to line 55. This is the last one that we have to do. Delete line 55 and line 61. Okay, so line 55 and line 61, go ahead and delete those out and Shift Tab. Now, I will do you a nice favor for those of you that maybe got lost during this process. No biggie. If you go to Slack, I'll put this in the Slack. And there you go. It's in Slack in case you weren't able to follow along. This one here. All right. If everything is correct and you go back to here and you hit refresh, you'll now notice that you have a whole bunch of new links. You have my profile, you have users, you have login, you have register, you have logout. I mean, you've got the full assembly of absolutely every link that we're possibly going to have in our system. And all of these are tied up to pages. You can actually navigate to the pages. They're not all necessarily going to work. There's going to be errors on these pages. You can go to create a new user and there's nothing there. Go to view all users and it just busts all together, right? Go to login, there's nothing there except for a form. Register, we have a register a new user, but we're missing the form. Logout doesn't do anything, it just navigates somewhere and dies. Go back to my house. You can rename these links too if you don't like these links. Like if you don't like my house and you want to call it something else, you can rename them underneath that main nav. All right. Like I said, the first thing I want to fix is displaying all the users because I'd like to see them all, and I'm sure you guys would like to see them all. I mean, we've been doing this for 4 weeks and we haven't seen anything on a page. So let's go to users and go to view all users. Right now we have a broken page, and the reason we have a broken page is because we're missing some essential pieces. So let's open that up in our IDE first. Go to our IDE. I'm just going to close off these links that I currently have open. And I'm going to go to users, my users folder. So here's users, and there's the index.php file. Like I said, I like to keep my stuff underneath a resource. So users is my resource. For my users, I basically build out my CRUD. I build out the index page, which will show all of my users. I build out a new, which is where my form will live for creating a brand new user. I build out a show, which is literally to show one user. And then I have a form partial. And the reason why I have a form partial is because edit and new use the exact same form. And I'm super, super lazy, and there's no way I'm going to write that form twice. So what I'll do instead is just input the form and give it the information I need to load up so I can do an edit. So I keep it separated, and then I have a create.php. Create, the difference between new and create is new is what I'm visually going to see. It's what my user is going to see in order to create a new user. That's the form they're going to populate. Create is the action. It's the thing that's actually going to take that data and then put it into the database for us. So new is what the user sees. Create is the action that will occur when they hit submit. Okay? Every resource is going to be defined like this. We're actually going to wind up adding 3 more files to this user's resource. We are going to add an edit, right? Edit is going to point to an update file. So we'll have edit.php, update.php. Edit will use the same form. And then we will have destroy.php. And destroy will destroy the user. So when we're done, we'll have 7 files. When we're done the course, we'll have 1 file called a controller. And it will handle all of those actions for us inside the controller. But for now, we have 7. All right. So what I've done is I've broken this down into different steps. And you'll notice it starts at step 8. And that's because step 8 won't happen until we've built the authentication, right? So we're not going to jump ahead and do step 8. Let's collapse the side panel. In case you're lost, we're under the users folder, index.php. That's where we're located. Users, index.php. At the top, you should see this include file, right? It should be there. And hopefully we don't have any errors screaming about the include file. Everything should be good. Right now, it should just say no users, essentially. Let's scroll to step 1. Step 1, get the users. All right. Sounds a little demanding, but we'll get the users. Calm down. We'll be okay. So to get the users, all right, we did this a week ago. Oh, what am I doing? I already know how to do it. I don't need the stupid thing. First, we're going to need to include the connect script, and this is where our root comes in handy. So we'll include our connection script. Now, I want to be careful because if something happens where somebody puts the connection script in this config file, and then I attempt to include it a second time, everything will blow up because I'll wind up with 2 connection scripts and I'll wind up with conflict. So the way around that is I don't use include. I instead use what? Anybody? Yeah, there you go. Include once. Exactly. Which basically says if it's already there, don't do it again. So in order to navigate to the home directory part of my application, I'm going to go to the root, that thing that we created before. And now I'm just basically starting from my lesson 4 folder and able to tell it exactly where I want to go to get my connect script. So it's include dot, which is concatenate, / includes / underscore connect dot php. And save. So that'll bring in our connection script. Now, it's not a bad idea for us to quickly step out and go check and make sure that this is working and that it's included properly. So if you open up your browser and hit refresh, you should see nothing. That's a good sign. If you see a big error, then that means our connect script wasn't loaded properly. So you might remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe you don't, but we created a connection script that allows us to connect to our database. We used an object that's built into PHP, a class library called PDO. The benefits of PDO is that it doesn't matter what database we're connecting to. The actual commands that we use after that point are identical. So if we connect later on to MS SQL or we move over to Postgres or some other database, we don't have to worry because all of our regular commands will remain the same. The only thing we would have to change is our query statements, right? Any of our SQL statements, we'd have to actually change those. But if it's a SQL language, you wouldn't even have to change those. All right. Next, include the connect script. Our next step is to actually create our SQL statement. So why don't we do that? So $SQL equals, sounds like a rap song, the SQL equal. And this is just a string. No magic here. You might have a nice IDE that actually styles your SQL statement for you, but it is just a string. It's literally a sentence. That's all it is that we're about to type inside these quote characters. All right, let's see how well you've been paying attention in your MySQL class. How do I get all of a resource? Select star, right. Select star from, what table am I grabbing from? Users. Yeah. Select star from users. Should seem very familiar. That's just SQL. The problem is when you type this into Workbench, it means something. Workbench is like, yeah, dude, I'll do that, because it's like running a command. However, when you type this into PHP, PHP is like, I don't know what that is. So you got to use something in order to interpret it. So what we're going to use a prepare statement, a query statement, or a prepare statement. We're going to do it the slow way first. So the slow way, we take our connection. This variable, by the way, we didn't just grab it out of thin air. This variable is coming from our connect script. Remember how I told you when you include these things, it literally just copies and pastes all the details from it into the file? Well, you might remember in our connect script, we have a con variable. If you call that variable Bob's connection, then you need to type Bob's connection. All right, I'm going to use con because I'm not a rebel. And I'm going to do a preparation. What prepare does is it says, take this SQL statement I wrote, treat it as though this is the command that I want to execute to MySQL. Anything else after this point is just hocus pocus, and it's just strings, which means I don't have to worry about SQL injection here, because any other value that I attach after this point will be treated as a string or a number, and that's it. It won't get treated as actual SQL. It won't get parsed, which is good. We don't want it parsed as SQL. All right, so we have our SQL string. Maybe it would help if I put these on the lines they're supposed to be on. You know what? This stuff is all confusing me, so I'm just going to delete mine because it's annoying. All right, next step. I need to take this statement and execute it. So I'm going to say, first I'm going to store it. So let's do store equals. There we go. Now I'm storing whatever comes back from that prep. Now I'm going to take the statement and I'm going to execute it. So prepare says, take this SQL statement, parse that as MySQL. Anything I give you after this is either a string, a number, or some kind of Boolean type. It is not SQL. So do not execute it as SQL. And SQL's like, no worries, I got your back. Once you prepare it, though, we haven't actually done anything yet. We've not submitted it. Next, we need to actually execute it. We need to say, now take that SQL statement I gave you and execute it, which will basically be MySQL will parse the statement, the query will go through, and MySQL will return back a query object. And the query object will basically be like, what do you want to do now? I have multiple choices to me. My choice is I want all of the data. I want literally every single user that you've got, and you're going to give it to me all as one block in a nice array format, please. So I'm going to create a variable to put that in called users, because that makes sense, because it's all the users. I like to name variables that make sense, not just create like, don't be that guy that's like A, variable A, because nobody knows what A means, right? Be descriptive. Some people, I had one student argue with me and say to me, yeah, but if you use A, I saved 4 characters by using A. I saved 4 characters. My code's now more efficient than yours. That's bullshit. That is not true. Because what happens, this symbol name you see here is actually pointing to a memory address, and the memory address contains 8 digits. So no matter what, you're using 4 bytes. No matter what you call it, if you use A, if you use B, if you use this is my big ass bloody variable, it only is going to equal out 4 bytes during interpretation time. So it doesn't matter. So what's the moral of the story? Make your variables describe your data. Make your variables say what is inside there. I mean, I kid you not. In our application, we have variables that are over 25 characters long because it was needed to describe what the heck was inside of it, right? So be descriptive. That's important. So users, $ statement, fetch all. What fetch all will do is literally say, fetch all the users, fetch them all. Give me all the users that are going to come back from this SQL statement, and then take them and store them in an array under users. There's another one called fetch. What fetch does is fetch will get the last record that it finds. It'll just pop it off and send it back to you. So you'll get one record, right? There's also count, so you can actually get back a count of the number of records. There's lots of ways to work with that data. Go ahead and save that. Now let's just cheat just a little bit. I don't want to actually type it all out. I want to see if this actually worked. So I'm going to use a handy little statement called Var Dump. What Var Dump will do is it will actually allow you to give it a value, whether it's an array, object, hash, doesn't matter, and it will spit it out in human readable text for you. So I'm going to give it $users and save it. And now I'm ready to go ahead to my browser, hit Control-R, and see a mess of users. Not as many as we had last time, only 10 users, but at least you can see all the information for those users. So that tells me it's working, yeah? That's correct, but that's not the file you're in. If you go back, you need to be in users / just users, actually. Just type in users. Yep. Hit enter. That's where we are. We're in that users. So if you look where I am, the stuff that you've been typing, you've probably been typing in the root index. We're actually in the users index. Is that where you're putting your code? Okay. Oh, okay, so you were navigating around? Yeah, we'll fix your other issue once we're done. Yeah, but just make sure you're in this file for now. All right, so now obviously you don't want to dump all the users out and keep them dumped out. So the best thing you can do, if you want to keep this statement so that you can remember how to do that, all I ever do is hit Control and the / and then that comments it out for me. That works in almost every IDE. I've yet to come across an IDE that it doesn't. That's Control and / the slash that goes that way. We've got users. No, you don't have users. All right, let's get a little bit further in our code. That'll help you out. All right. Before we actually move along, I have step 2 is define the title and active link. We'll hold off on that. So scroll down a little bit to step 3. Include the header.php file. That's a super important step because if you notice, right now, if I refresh, we have no styling. Our wonderful navigation isn't there. Our footer's not there. Our page is shoved all the way over to the left and looks super old, like 2000-ish internet, right? Let's bring it up to 2019 a little bit. So put your cursor inside here. I have an opening and closing PHP tag. I've already done 20% of the work. All right, go ahead and put your cursor in there. And we're going to include our header file. And the best part about this is we can use those helpers we built. So we can say root. Sorry, nope, we need to say include. All right. Then we can say root with capital O's dot / partials / underscore header.php. We've now included our header. While we're at it, we should definitely include our footer, but I'll give you a second to catch up. I'll also show you a neat trick that's in IDEs. It's called code folding. How many of you have heard of code folding? No? Okay, cool. So if you hover on the line numbers, you'll notice there's these weird little arrows, these little chevrons. If you click them, it folds up your code. Your code's not gone. It hasn't been removed. It just hides it. If you click the arrow again, it unfolds it. The benefits of that is that when you need to do or work on something else, but you don't want to scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you can just collapse it. What's really handy with code folding, though, when you learn the shortcut keys, if you have a really long file with a ton of function definitions and all you want to do is find the correct function, you can actually code fold all the function definitions, and that way you can just see the symbol names and quickly scan through the file to find what you're looking for. Code folding is super cool. If your IDE doesn't support code folding, switch IDEs, because that is definitely necessary. Step 7, include the footer. That's what we're going to do next. I'm going to highlight that comment, and I'm going to replace it. And obviously, all I have to do is follow what I did with the header. I'm going to include root dot slash partials slash underscore footer.php, and then save. So now I've got my header and I've got my footer. So we've got our header and our footer. Cool. If that's working, and you jump back to your browser and hit Control-R, you should now see the nice styling in place, some links, and you should see no users. Perhaps you should create a new one, our big error message. Okay, let's quickly jump into the actual div container. So unfold it. Remember, just over on the left-hand side, just click the arrow to unfold it. And we're going to scroll down until we find step 4. But actually, why don't we fix something? See this href link on line 37? That's not going to work. That's going to break because it doesn't have our base path in it. So why don't we fix it? Just put your cursor on the right of the dot, erase the dot. We'll use an inline echo statement, and we'll just put base path there. And then we're going to need to make sure we also add users after it. There. Now we have an absolute URL and no chance of it breaking. That's on line 37. So now we have a nice absolute URL. Step 4, check to see if any users exist. Well, that's actually an easy check. All we have to do is look at the users that came back and count them, right? And so some languages support .count, which is cool. PHP supports count as well, but it's a function call. It's not a dot call. There's no dot length or dot size, so we'll definitely have to do the count piece. Either way, we need an if condition on line 41. So I'm going to highlight the step 4, check to see if any users exist, and I'm going to replace that with if count $ users is greater than 0, colon. That's not a semicolon, that's a colon. What the colon says to PHP is the closing tag is to come. There will be a closing tag. The idea is if I have no users, I have no reason to show the table. There's no users, I don't need a table, right? So what we're going to do is this table is not even going to be viewable if there are no users. And the way I'm telling that is I'm counting the users, and as long as there is more than 0 records in that array, more than 0 items in the array, then I will go ahead and execute whatever is below it. Remember that cold folding feature that I showed you? Bring your cursor out on the left-hand side of the table, hit it, and it will code fold it. And then we can see step 5. If not, display a different message. Well, that sounds suspiciously like an else statement. So I'm going to highlight step 5, and I'm going to change it to else. And it's going to do something very goofy. Oh, stop that. It's going to do something very goofy and move my stupid PHP statement over for some reason. So I'm going to move it back to where it goes. Oh, one step too far. My bad. There. So if our users are greater than 0, display the table. Otherwise, display this alert that perhaps you should create a new user, right? So if I have no users in the table, I'm going to display this alert that you saw right here. This yellow alert will display. I'm going to use my cold folding feature. I'm going to put it beside my div, and I'm going to fold up my code. And then line 6 is step 6 and the if. Well, that's super easy. It's just literally the word and if as one word. No spaces. So the 3 lines you're typing on line 41, on line 55, and on line 63. Essentially, it's an inline if condition, if else condition. If we have users, we'll show the table. Otherwise, we'll show the alert. If that's all good, you should be able to go to your browser, hit refresh, and the alert should disappear, but we still can't see our users. That's not good. The reason we can't see our users is because we're not actually outputting any information in regards to our users yet. So, see the little fold up next to the table? Let's unfold our table and see what we need. According to this, we need their name, their email, and their created on date. Not a big deal. We can totally do that. Come down here to where the T-body is, and it says iterate over the users and display their details. Cool. PHP has a bunch of different iterators that you can use. It has a standard for loop. You guys have all written for loops, right? Yeah. How many of you have written a while loop? A few of you? Do while loop? Yeah. How about an until? You ever written an until? No? That's a Rubyism. So instead of while, you have until, which works opposite than while. Kind of goofy. PHP, I don't know if Java supports this because I'm not a Java developer. Do you guys have for each, which allows you to iterate over an array? Cool. So does PHP. It's a very common way to iterate over an array, but it works a little bit different. It doesn't just iterate over the array. It will actually iterate over a hash object, and it will allow you to take each of the keys that are defined inside that hash object and assign them to one variable and assign the values to another variable, which means you can have keys and values separated. Makes it super powerful, right? For now, we're not going to do that, but we will see that very soon when we build our Flash notifier. For now, we're just going to build a very simple for each loop. So let's write an inline PHP statement on line 53. We're going to write for each. The first value we give the for each is the array we want to iterate over, which is $users. The next piece of syntax is the keyword as. What as basically means, for each item in this, I want you to alias it as whatever variable you define after that. And it can literally be any variable name you want. However, the most common convention is the singular of whatever the plural is, right? So this would be $user. This variable is made up. We're making it up. It's an alias for the list item that's going to get iterated and put into it. When that happens, we now have, for the first iteration, whatever the first list item is inside that array. It's now stored in user, and we can work with it. Last but not least, we need this colon at the end. And when I write these things, I like to write the opener and the closer immediately so I don't forget. So I don't wind up with issues later on that I forgot to write the closer. So underneath, another inline PHP statement. I'm just going to close the for each by typing in end for each. So right now, those are lines 53 and line 54. That's our for loop. That is going to iterate the number of users in time. So I think in total I have 10 users. It should iterate 10 times. But it doesn't matter. I don't need to care because it's only going to iterate for each of the items inside the list. So I don't have to care. I don't have to count it. I don't have to stop it at any point. It will stop on its own, right? Next, I'm going to put my cursor in the middle between those two lines and tab in. And what I'm going to write in here is my HTML row structure, right? So rows are TR tags, right? So I need a set of TR tags. Let's put in a TR tag and another TR tag. There's my row, right? So now if you look at my table, I'm going to have a row which will represent a user. And then the next iteration will add another row which will represent another user, and so on and so forth, right? Next, I want my cells, right? So that I have the actual cells that contain the user's information. The cells should match up with these headings, right? So my first cell needs to be the name. The second cell will be the email address. And then the third cell will be the created on date. So we'll just add in 3 TD tags so I don't forget them. Now it says name. It doesn't say last name. It doesn't say first name. It says name. But in my database, my very atomic database, I have a first name column and a last name column, which is a smart thing to do because keeping your data atomic makes it much easier to search. So obviously I want to concatenate it. I could get cheeky. I could get cheeky and create a prepared statement in MySQL that auto-concatenates for me when I call it. But we're not going to do that because that's up to your SQL teacher. What we're going to do instead is we're just going to concatenate first name and last name together. Right? A nice little PHP inline echo statement. Right? Which should be coming old hat at this point. And in there, we're just going to literally write user, right? The aliased item that came from the array. User, believe it or not, is its own hash. And it has keys. And the coolest part about this, those keys are literally the columns in your database. So whatever you call those columns inside your database is the same keys that are available in the user record. So we have a first name key, so we're going to give it the first name key, like so. Now, like I said, I want to concatenate this. I could just concatenate it right directly in the statement if I wanted to, but I always find it looks goofy. So instead, I'm just going to go space, write another inline PHP statement. And then again, it's $user, last name. And it's going to wrap to the next line just because it ran out of room. I'll even do you a solid just so it's a little easier to read. I'll put it on the next line. There you go. It makes it a little easier to read. So that's going to come out with the first name and the last name. Don't forget this little space between here so that you make sure that it says your first and last name, and there's a space and it just run on in one sentence, right? Next, I want to print out the email address. That is super easy. Just do an inline PHP echo statement, $user, email this time. Nice and simple, not very complicated. Not like the next statement. The next statement is much more complicated. In fact, I need to zoom in because I always forget the syntax. The next statement, definitely break these two TD tags apart. Put your cursor in between them. I'm just going to add some distance here so that you can see that these are 3 separated TD tags. Sometimes when I explain things, I feel like I'm explaining a magic trick. So it just kind of sounds like that. All right, we're going to actually create a date statement. The first part is going to be the date. The second part will be the time. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to put a PHP echo statement there. I'm going to duplicate it by hitting Alt-Shift and pressing down. And then I'm going to put a BR tag in the middle. And then I'm going to show you some cheekiness. Put your cursor next to the first equal sign. Hold down your Alt key and click next to the second equal sign. And you'll wind up with two blinking cursors. If your IDE doesn't work with Alt, try Control. Sometimes Control does it. These are two completely usable cursors, and as I type, both cursors will print what I type, which is good because a huge amount of this statement is identical. So now I can type in date, which is a function. Put my cursors back at level. They're going to take a format, and I need to pass them str, to, time, string 2 times. So str, to, time, and it's a function call. Make sure you put the parentheses in. It's going to take in user created at. The only difference between these two statements is the format. Other than that, they're the exact same. Multi-cursor, super, super handy. The date format for the first one is going to be D/M/Y, which stands for obviously day, month, year. And the second one is going to be G, which stands for hours, but in 12-hour increments, not 24-hour time. I, which stands for minutes, space A, which stands for meridian, which is your AM, PM. Or meridium, I think it actually is pronounced. Go ahead and save that. What time are we at? 9:17. How many people have broken pages, just out of curiosity? Okay. I think we will render this, and then I will help you with your broken pages, and we'll call it a night. All right. Go to your browser, hit refresh, those of you that don't have broken pages. Looks like we have a fatal error. Call to undefined functions string row time, because I didn't type to time, I wrote row time. Yeah, it's row time. An interesting thing you can also do in your browser when you spell something wrong, you can highlight it, hit Control D to select the other one, and then go correct it. Oops. There we go. It should be string to time, not row time. I don't know what row time is. Doesn't sound enjoyable. It sounds like exercise. All right. Once you've done that correction, you should be able to jump over to your browser, hit refresh or Control R, and ta-da! You should have your first name, last name, their email address, and the date that they were created on. All right, like I said, we're going to call it because there's enough people that I'm going to be kept busy for the next 30 minutes, and we'll run out of time anyways. So next week, we will finish show, which is going to take a few seconds. We'll finish the registration form so that we can actually register a brand new user. We'll implement our authentication. That's the goal for next week. I don't know if we'll get there, but that's the goal. That being said, there will not be a midterm for this semester. Instead, we will have a final. The final will be worth 30%, okay? Because I don't think we're at the point to do a midterm. We're definitely not, okay? The project. Let's talk about the project just before we get into helping everybody. The project can be found under projects or even under this week's lesson. You can see the link to it. They link to the same location either way. Here's the project. There's already a rubric up as well. The project is due Sunday, October 27th. If I find that we don't get CRUD done and we don't have update or delete done, I will extend it by probably about 2 weeks, which might be likely, okay? So if we don't get CRUD done, I'll extend it. However, it would be nice to get it done so that we're not too far behind. All right. So project part 1, 2, and 3, all 3 parts are due the same day. The first part, super, super easy. You're going to plan a project with your group members. You do not have to work in a group. I will repeat that because somebody will ask me at least 4 times. You do not have to work in a group. If you want to work individually, that's totally fine. However, you can work in a group with up to 4 people, okay? I don't restrict projects to a certain idea. I'm not going to be like, make a bookstore, make a record store. That's not what I do. I leave these open because you get too many of those in your other classes. You get too many of these rigid projects that you have to build. I want you to take advantage of the time for this and build something that you can really show off when you go out for your co-op, right? Something that you can be like, this is what I built. Bam, right? Drop the mic moment. That's what I call it, the drop the mic moment, where you build something that other people are not building, totally take unique control over it. I do have requirements though, right? So I have a requirement that, well, let's go part by part. Part 1 will be worth 10%. They're all worth 10%. There's 5 of them in total. You have 3 of them being initialized today. You're going to plan a project that will encompass the following ideas. It must have role-based authentication. That is a requirement. It needs HTML pages that retrieve dynamic content, meaning your content is not hard-coded into the page, but it's stored in the database. Can be modified or edited or changed. And you need to demonstrate a relational resource, meaning you must have a child-parent relationship. You guys probably are already talking about relationships in your database class. Have you built a parent-child relationship in your database class? That can happen depending on who you have. How many of you have Ben? And how many of you have Andrew? Okay. Those of you with Ben will likely know what a parent-child relationship is fairly soon. Those of you with Andrew, it might be a little bit because she tends to focus on the select statements for quite a while. So if that's the case, I might do a crash course on parent-child relationships in MySQL just so we can get to that point with foreign keys because you need a parent-child relationship. Parent-child relationship, in case you're curious, think of like a book, right? A book has an author. The author would be the parent. The book would be the child because the author can have multiple books. That's a parent-child relationship. All right, so you need to plan that out, what you're going to do as long as it meets those requirements. You need to provide it in a presentation. Don't go over the top. Make it simple, either like a Google slide deck. You're not actually presenting to the class. I'm the only one that's going to see this. Either do it as a Google slide deck or a quick write-up in Google Docs. Don't spend a ton of time on it. The whole thing should take you maybe a couple hours. That's it, okay? Make sure you tell me who your group members are. That's a very important part. Part 2, literally when we're done the authentication piece, you should be able to take the authentication piece out of our portfolio project and dump it right into your project, meaning part 2 would be complete, okay? That being said, though, those are the requirements for part 2. We will be meeting those requirements when we build it anyway. So just make sure you follow those. Part 3 is a little bit different. Part 3 is where you're going to actually implement the user-child or the parent-child resources. You're going to make sure you have all of your CRUD resources so that you can create, read, update, and delete a user, create, read, update, and delete a parent, and create, read, update, and delete a child resource. You are not limited to having one parent-child resource. You can have as many as you want. If you want 16 resources, put 16 resources in there. I don't care. And they're fairly easy. Once you learn to create one, it's very easy to replicate that same idea to create multiple more. So it should go fairly easy. You're going to also incorporate ability to upload a file. That will likely die in a fire because I don't see us getting to that before the middle of the term. So likely that requirement will be pulled out. All partials layouts must be completed. The partials are those reusable little components of HTML, what we were doing today, where you have header as a separated component, footer as a separated component. Basically, if you find yourself writing the same HTML twice, you need to take that out and put it as a partial and then include it, right? So that way you're not writing it more than once. And then you need to, okay, this is a little strong. You do not need to include a CSS framework like Bootstrap, but you need CSS. I don't want just plain HTML. I want it to at least have some structure and design and Not tons of design. Don't like go over the top unless you want to. I obviously don't put that much weighting on those working on by themselves, but if you're in a group of 4, I expect it to look, somewhat clean. This is just prototypal. These first 3 parts are prototypal, which means it's get it working, make sure it functions, and then add a little bit of style to it so it's at least clean enough to look at. The next 2 parts will be refine it, make it look clean, make it look nice, something that you can present, because in the 6th part, you present it. Okay? Any questions about this? There is a rubric, a fully written up rubric that you can view by clicking on View Rubric that tells you the breakdown of the points, how it works. There's 300 points in total between all 3 parts. It sounds like a lot of work. It's surprisingly not that much work. It's actually probably about a couple of days worth of work in total. Any questions? Yeah. 27. No. This is just the first 3 parts. Yeah. The next 3 parts will be after that, and they will be due in December. So that presentation will be done in December. You're not presenting it. You're just giving me your presentation for it as a document. You're going to tell me what your plans are and what you're going to build in a document, and then I'll read your document. You can either do it as a slide presentation if you want to be creative, or you can just do it as a Google document. That's totally fine. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. The presentation piece, just for those of you that are not big on presenting, I don't force people to present. I never do. So you have a choice of either doing an actual presentation where you can show off your stuff, or you do up a Google write-up and you give me your write-up. It's going to be your choice. But that's not till part 6, and that's not till December. So don't stress out about that now. Any other questions? No? Cool. If you need to contact me, you're all now proud members of Slack. You can always just Slack me a message and let me know. I am now available to help those who got stuck.